Welcome back, it's Hydro Mike, and you're watching Hydro Coding. Last time we left off with me creating a grid over the screen to help visualize alignment of objects on our screen. And then I went through how I created each row of the cars to display them on the screen. And then my next goal was to create the logs, and then also create the collision for the logs. So this episode we're going to go through creating the logs, which will be exactly the same as creating the cars, and then also creating the collision. I did the collision with the logs and the cars different, and I'll go through that. And then also instead of having to comment out and re-comment in the grid if I wanted to use it, for now I made it so the grid will appear on screen when I hit this or hold the spacebar down, and it'll disappear when I let go of the spacebar. And then I also drew our first bit of text to the screen, just the label of the game. And if I go to this screen and show you what it's gonna look like by the end of this video, here you go. That's what it's gonna look like so far. And like I said, if I hold spacebar now, it just draws the grid to the screen, and if I let it go, the screen disappears. Maybe later, instead of the grid, I can do this. If you didn't like the spawn of your row of cars and the logs, you can hit spacebar to keep randomizing your rows of cars. Oh, that was the other thing I did. Last episode I said that I wanted to put all the cars and everything into a function, and then I wanted them all to have their own randomizing, because the way I had it before, it was only the last row of cars that got affected by the random number I created. So now I made a function by doing that. It's the same exact thing as if I was doing it inside a class here. Same idea, except you don't do the self stuff, which refers to it itself in the class. But it's the exact same idea, right? I just made a function, defined it, I called it called it car update, right? And all I did is I created my car X and car Y variable, which just determines the width of my car and the on the screen the height of up and down of where my car will be drawn. So those variables are the same that they were prior to this. Car X is the width. Car Y is for the first row is negative 48. So it'll get drawn negative 48 pixels from the bottom of the screen, or sorry, from the top of the screen, because we're on the X now, or sorry, the Y now. The Y starts at 0 at the top and gets bigger as it goes down. So we're going to draw the logs. Jeez, I'm never going to get this right. I'm talking about the logs, describing the cars, blah blah blah. Car Y, height, which would be all the way to the bottom like I said, minus 48. I will get this right without confusing you. Car X starts at width, so all the way to the right of the screen, all the way to the bottom, minus 48. And that's where we're going to draw our first row of cars. And this 4i in random range here, this should look familiar. It's the exact same way we did the other one, except for each row now has its own random range instead of just one random range that ended up just affecting the last row of cars. So the first row of cars, they get added into their same car row group with a range between 2 and 5. Same with this next row. Same with the next row. Same with the next row. I'm just changing the range. And this also I can use later if I literally make a variable that's just a random range between 1 and 3, and then another variable that's just a random range between 3 and 5, and use those variables in here instead of hard coding them. Again, it gives me another level of randomness that I can be used to create maybe a easy, medium, hard mode in the game, something, anything. But we'll get there. We'll get there when it comes down to, okay, the game works fine, the game is fun. What can we do to make it more challenging or maybe easier if need to be? But at the same time, we're going to be working on sound. How do I let the user change the volume of the sounds and things like that? We'll get there. Never done them before, but we'll get there. So now, down here, it's the logs. Logs get added with the car update too, because why do just the cars and then make one just for the logs? There would be reasons to do that, but for now, I don't have any reason to do it. If I want new cars, I'm also going to want new logs. So I just put them all in the same function. The logs are same deal, same as the car, except for instead of adding them into our car rows, we're just adding them into a log row. And here's where one of the new items is. I also have a group called allsprites.add. So every time a row of logs gets created, it's added to its log row group, right? And also, I made another group called allsprites that is getting added into, and I'll explain why. So basically, now I have a group for the row 1, 2, or a group for row 1, a group for row 2, group for row 3, a group for row 4, right? And then I also have this other group called allsprites that every log is getting added into that allsprites group as well. And that's going to come down to the collision. I shouldn't have called it allsprites. I should have made it all logs or something like that. I may do something like this with the cars as well, all cars. And then I could even do an all sprites that actually has every sprite in it too. And I'll explain why you would do this. So just know now, each row of logs has its own group, and each row of logs is added into one bigger group called allsprites. Okay. As you can see, my grid is not commented out anymore. I made a function that creates my grid, and then just inside my my game loop, if the event is k space, which is holding the space bar down, then what I do is I call that function. What does that function do? It creates my grid. Easy as that, right? And what's my grid? My grid are lines. So in calling it, I am also creating the lines for the grid at the same time, right? Excuse me. And as long as I have down here for I in grid column and grid row, just like before, I don't have to leave it. I don't have to comment it out now for it not to show. If I'm not holding space, nothing's getting added to the grid group, so there's nothing in them. Therefore, this can run, but there's nothing in them. So guess what? Nothing. You can't see anything happening. It's checking each time to make sure there's nothing in grid or rows. But if there's nothing in there, then it doesn't draw anything or whatever, right? Okay, so now, like I said, we had our rows and logs, or cars and logs, right? So just like before, same thing. Our car groups are being updated, and as you can see, I had the logs updating individually, and this allsprite new group that I created, which holds all the logs in it. Well, if I do both of them in the game loop here, the update, it'll basically draw them twice, right? I don't need that to happen. I just need the logs to draw once. So I have the individual log group that I can, if I need to, in here update in some way if I have to, if I want to. And But as far as updating for the normal game operation, I just need the one all sprites group to update, which does the same thing as calling each one of these individually, but instead it's got all the information in one. Why, you may ask, why we would do that? And I've also changed the order of this. It's all still the same stuff down here, except for I'm drawing the border at the very end. Why? You always got to remember order of operations. The last thing I draw is going to be the top layer. Like I'm drawing, which I haven't explained yet, the text to the screen, the group of logs, our frog, then our cars, and then our border. So, by doing this, our logs are at the very bottom. Well, sorry, our game title would be at the very bottom. And then our logs, and then our frogs. So that means I draw my logs, and then my frog. So that means when my frog is interlapping with my logs, my frog will show up on top of it, because it's drawn after my logs. But my cars are drawn after my frog, so if my frog overlaps my cars are on top of the frog. And then if anything goes to the edge of the screen, the border is drawn on top of any of it, giving it that appearance that everything goes off the screen. It just gives it a nice border. Nothing's going over the border. Everything is under the border. Right? Alright. So, I've explained that I made a function for the cars and logs. I made an extra group to carry the logs, and why. Let's go to the log group here. Logs, alright? As far as when we create a log, it's the exact same as creating a car. There's none of this changed. But, as you can see, I'm drawing them all brown, which I actually don't even need that to happen. This does not even have to happen right now anymore. That was unneeded. That was me trying to do that same thing I was doing with the cars. I don't need that to happen anymore. Okay, but what I am saying here, if okay, this first half is what it's determining is if my frog is on the log, and if it's on the log, my frog will now start moving in the direction of the log, giving the appearance that my frog has jumped onto the log and now is holding onto the log, right? And all I'm doing is detecting whether or not my logs X, which is its top left corner, plus 116, takes it almost all the way to the right side of the log, but not quite. If that is greater than the frog's top left corner, and the log's top left corner is less than the frog's top left corner plus 16, I know it's kind of confusing. Like I said before, I write this stuff down as I'm trying to think of it or do it, because I confuse my stuff constantly, right? So that gets all that does is make sure that on the x-axis I have just narrowed the area down. If my frog is on the same x-plane, or not plane, but if my log is going across here and my frog is anywhere between the start and end of my log, I'm not talking about on it, not the same y, but literally the same x. If it could be way down here below it, but if it's in between the edges of the log, it'll be detected, right? That's all this first line's saying. And then the next if statement is me checking the y. So first one gets me in between the edges of the log. The next one's going to check whether or not I'm intersecting the log, right? So it's saying if the log's y, which is its vertical, minus 8 is less than the frog's y, and the log's top is greater than the frog's top, meaning the log's top is greater, that means the log's top is lower on the screen than the frog's top, What does that mean? So all I'm saying is if the frog on the X is within this area, and basically you can just think about it this way: if the top of the frog's box is above the log's top, then if the self direction is 1, then it's plus self speed, which self speed is just the speed of the log. So my frog will just take on the speed of whatever log it jumps on, and if the self direction is not 1, basically, so I'm saying else, the frog speed is negative. And you might be asking, what is the self speed direction equals 1? Well, remember when we created the logs, right? Down here, or actually where we create the logs, where are we at here? When we created the logs, we had this variable -1 or 1, and that was determining the direction. So again, when creating these logs, we have this information, so I just reused it up here. This is just determining whether it's going left or right. If it's going 1, if the direction is 1, that just means it's going right on the screen, and that just means I need to make sure that my frog goes right. So plus speed, and if it's -1, that means it's going left across the screen. I gotta make sure. I just need the program, that was just a way for me to determine whether the frog was going left or right, and then make the frog speed according to that, left or right. Kind of hard to explain, I guess, but we're doing it here, not down here. Sorry, here. So that gets my frog again between the log's end and then above the log's top, right? And then adjusting the speed, right? So good. That was me getting it to appear that my frog's on a log. What else do we need, though? I need to know if the frog is not on a log, right? In the car section, it doesn't matter. The goal is to not be sharing a space with the car, right? But when it gets to the log, the idea is you have to be sharing a space for the log, or you're dead. I never understood why a frog couldn't be in the water. But that's just how the game is. I guess there's sharks in the water. Barracudas. I don't know. But anyway. So in the log section, we have to make sure that we can determine if a frog is on a log or not on a log. In this section, we determine that yes, the frog within these variables is on a log and change its speed, right? But there was no way for me to detect it. Like I guess this has no way. But if it's not on, then he's dead. There's no way I could detect whether he's on, but I couldn't not detect. If that makes any sense. So, now getting into why I made that all sprite group, which just holds all the logs and information, right? So I made this variable called yes. Why I called it yes, I don't know, but I did. I guess it was because in my head, colliding yes. So, what does it mean? So, yes equals pygame sprite collide any, right? And that's just a built-in function inside the sprite group that allows me to check whether or not my one object or my one sprite, which is my frog, and then a group. I can check it against anything in a group, right? So this is just determining, did my frog touch anything inside this group, right? So I was like, oh, if I make one group that holds all the logs information, then I can test it with this one statement, right? And the cool thing about it is, if it's not touching anything, it spits out no, or none. And I'm not saying none, N-U-N. None, N-O-N-E. Just says none, constantly as the game's running. And then when I hit on a log, nothing, right? It stops saying none. So I can capture that. I was like, okay. So that spits out, if I went print yes down here. It would just say none, 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 none until it's on a log, and then it would say nothing. I was like, okay, cool. So I can determine if my frog is above, and when we go back to the game view, I'll explain better. But if my frog's, let's just say the middle of the screen for now. So I was basically, all I'm saying in this section, if my frog's Y, my vertical position of my frog is above a certain line on the screen, right, which would be basically the first row of logs. If my frog is above that line, and so less than 76, that would be that, right? And then also I put a cap on it if it's greater than, so basically meaning if it's above this line and then the next frog.rect is greater than 62, that section is saying, okay, that's if I'm past the top log. If I'm past the top log, I don't, he's home, right? That's where I'm supposed to go, so I don't want to kill him when he jumps off the last log. I only want this to be if he's above the start of the first row of logs and below the top of the last logs, right? And then this and yes equals none. That was when I could capture, right? It basically says if yes, which I'm just saying, if this statement says none, that means I'm dead. I just have it printing dead to the screen, right? And you're probably like, what do you mean? So like I said, if I'm not on anything, like every loop of this game, it's this yes statement is printing out none. None, 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 none. And I will but when I hop on a log, it stops saying nothing, right? So if I hop off a log and I'm within the top and bottom of my log rows, it'll start saying none again. And if that happens, I'm dead. I'm not on a log and I'm in between these areas. I just died. And this is the same thing as I did with the cars. My logs are either going left or right across the screen, and they're moving every frame. They're moving. I'm not controlling them. I'm just setting their speed. If they're supposed to be going left, make their speed plus whatever speed. And remember, when creating, we're actually passing in the speed variable right here. So it's either plus or minus whatever speed we passed in. If it's going plus, if its direction is 1, that means it's going to the right. If it's -1, it's going to the left, and it's going. Let's say the speed of this log is 1. That means it's moving 1 pixels every loop of the game. So it's moving 1 pixel 60 times a second across the screen. This one is moving 3 pixels of the screen to the right 60 times a second. I don't think I explained this very well, but that's what I did. I made basically, to sum it all up, I have my individual logs in their own group, and I also have the logs all getting put into this overarching group that holds all of their information. And I'm detecting whether I'm colliding with a built-in function called sprite collide any between my frog and that group. And if I am colliding, if I'm not colliding when I'm above the bottom of the log and below the top of the logs, print out dead on the screen. And if we go to this view so you can see it happening, don't worry about seeing the game for a second. Well, that works. We'll put it right here. So you can see it happen, right? So we still have my frogs colliding down here. Perfect, right? So instead of turning red, my goal is maybe a squished sound. And then my sprite, instead of being a picture of the frog, it'll turn into a squished frog. Whatever thing I can come up with, right? That's all down to how artsy I can get when it comes to that. But as far as collision detection, everything's working fine, right? Still down here at the cars, which was a concern. And you notice the order of operations, like I said earlier, my frog is being drawn underneath my car because my cars are being drawn after my frog every frame, right? So now we have this safe zone. This safe zone, I don't know what. I think I'm going to have like maybe some small, like 20 by 20. For now, we're going to call them squares. But maybe have them on this random like path going across the screen at a random interval time that maybe your frog could eat for extra points or something. And I might have some random barriers spawn in this area, so I can't jump onto a log from right where here because there's a rock in the way or something to make this area more exciting anyway. But I digress. So remember now, it's going to check. Well, we'll do the first things first. If my frog is between the X or the start and the end of a log, and my top of my frog is greater than the top of my, or less than, but I'm going to say greater than because it'll make sense to you. The top of my frog is above the top of the log, then I should be going the same speed as the frog, or the log. There you go. I jump on a log, I now go the same speed as a log. Right? Alright. So there. So now the top of this frog right now is at that magical line that I said. If you're above this line and you're not colliding with any sprite inside our all sprites group, which is just holding all of our logs, then you should be dead, right? So if I jump up here and I don't touch a log, down at the bottom left, it should just print a constant dead. So let's see if it does that. There you go. Screaming dead. Because why? Because I'm not on a log when I said that I'm over this point. But if I jump on a log, it doesn't continue printing out dead. Right? So now in theory, I can go to here and then I'm dead. Not dead. Dead. Not dead. Not dead. Dead. Not dead. And then right here is that magical line. If I'm above, it shouldn't print dead anymore. It's kind of hard to explain. I wish I could explain it easier because the concept's really easy, but I think I've confused it. I might be confusing you a little bit. And you might think, well, if I'm here, then a log can pick me up. Yes. But I'm going to have it as soon as dead is detected the first time to stop. That's where, okay, you're dead, reset. And not, you won't be just sitting here. The game will reset the moment it hits, it says dead. Dead, game reset. You're now back at the bottom trying to do it all again. Or whatever, maybe you'll start in the middle. I don't know. And then up in the top, you know what? We can go to the other view now, I guess, since I showed you that so now if I hit spacebar, right? There you go. The grid gets drawn over top of, well, under everything really. But that way I can see if things are still lining up, right? Frog still doing. Now when I jump on a log though, I can unalign my frog. See, he's not perfectly in line with anything anymore. That's okay, because when it comes to this log, you're just trying to get on this log anywhere. if that log has a smidgen over the line, you know, I can jump onto it, which is, I think that's good. And then if I do get to the edge of the screen, if I'm not lined up, like bam, it'll line me back up again. Like if I get to the edge of the screen, you know, there we go, you know. I guess that's the one thing I didn't show either. Just like in the original Frogger, if you get to the edge of the screen, you know, it pushes you off the log. So you just can't ride it out. So I get here, then it'll push me across. So all in all, I think I have the functionality complete when it comes to Frogger. Like I said, I'm going to create these dragonflies or flies or something, and maybe some obstacles of some point in here, some static ones, something that's not moving in that each instance of the game loop, or not game loop, but instance of the game, they'll randomize between certain locations. So there'll be like 3 or 4 rocks up here, maybe 1 or 2 bugs flying around that you could try to eat if you want. Or, I don't know, maybe there's something, I don't know what a predator is of a frog. There's something for the frog to kind of avoid in this area as well. But I don't know, I think I like the idea of having some obstacles that'll make it hard where, like if I'm here on the road, if there's a rock right above me, you know, I have to go over to go up. I can't just go, if there's this huge gap, I can't just go all the way straight up. Maybe there's going to be a rock right here where I can't. And I get here and I'll get pinched between 2 cars, and I'll have to, you know, something to vary how, you know, maybe there's a rock right where my frog is right now, so I would have to go around the rock and up to jump onto a log. I know the original one had random things appear on the logs too that you can eat, but I think that's what I'm going to do down here. Have that random food extra point thing. And then up here, of course, there's the goals. We still got to figure out the goal, which would be up here. Like I think there was 4 across the top. There was like 1 in this area, 1 here, and 1 here. Some random spread across the screen. And then there was random things that showed up in there that would give you extra points too. So, top right of the screen, or top center, you see we have the title Frogger. And that is because I made a new class. Go figure, right? So I can use it to create any text that I may have on the screen. So when I put, maybe the top right of the screen will be your score. I just create an instance of this class to create the text. Blah, 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 blah. Same thing we did with the cars, same thing we did with the logs, same thing we did with the lines. You know, it's just rinse and repeat with slight variations each time. So, remember I made game title as, just to show that off, right? It said, I didn't change anything, it said Frogger, right? So, if I change this, the 2 times that we've used it so far is the caption of the window, right? And top center of the screen while the game's playing, right? So if I change this to Space Invaders, I don't know if it'll center properly. I haven't got that. I haven't tested it completely yet. But so now just by changing it there, that one instance, I should have the top of my window should say Space Invaders, and the top of my actual game while it's playing should say Space Invaders, because I used that variable in both spots. And we'll use this so you can see it. Let's hit run. There you go. It's not centered anymore, but changing that one variable changed it here and here, and that's why you use variables. That's the whole main reason. Obviously, I got to figure out a better way to center my text. I'm trying to figure that out as we speak. That was the last thing I implemented. So once I figure out how to calculate, basically the problem is everything's being detected by the top left corner of the text. So just imagine a box around the text, and the top left of it is its X, right? I need the center. So then I can place it width divided by 2, which would put it in the center of the screen. You know, that's my current issue with that. But variables, very good. All should be well again. There you go. But, so how did we do that? We made a class called text that I want to pass in a font, which is the font name, like Times New Roman, Arial, whatever font. And I'm using a system font, which can be good or bad. System fonts means basically since I'm on a Windows computer, I'm going to have your basic system fonts that come with every window, right? Every Windows operating system. Now, if this was to play on maybe a Mac or something, it might flag an error because they don't have a font named that. Could be a problem, but right now I'm not focusing on multi-platform, right? So, fonts, I'm passing in the font name, literally the name of the font, because that's how it works in Pygame. The size of the font, the text is literally what I want it to say. Frogger, Space Invaders, whatever. The color, its X position and its Y position. Right? So self.text is just me saying pygame.font.systemtext in font. Remember, font is just the font name, so it's going to pass in whatever font name and then whatever size. There you go. Now I have my text, like the settings to the text that I want to create. And then, of course, the color equals color. But to be able to draw text to the screen, you have to do this dot render, right? So my self.text, yeah, I know it's probably not the best variable naming here since I have a text and a txt as well. But anyway, my text is my self.text text dot render, right? And what I want this text, remember, this is what I wanted to say. Frogger, right? False, this could be true or false. It's for analyzing or analyzing, not analyzing. Is that what it's called? Anyway, the jaggedness, do you want it smoothed or do you want it jaggy like old school? I have it jaggy like old school. And then self.color, which we know is the color. So I'm passing in what I want it to say. And then they're always going to be, right now, anti-analyte. I can't say the word. Hopefully you know what I mean. And then it's color, right? And then this self.width, this section is what I'm having trouble with the centering of the screen. So, the self.width, I'm saying equals the text.getWidth, what should be the width of my text, right? So let's say it's 82 pixels wide. Same with height, it's giving me the height of it. So I was thinking that I could just make a variable called centerX, and if I had my width divided by 2, that would give me the center of it, and the height of it divided by 2 would give me the center of it, right? So then when it came to drawing it to the screen, what am I drawing? Self.text, which is this information, what I wanted the text, blah, 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 which all this right here is all this information, and then this right here is all, essentially all this information plus this information, and that's what I want to draw to the screen. And where do I want it to draw? Oh, I didn't even talk about the X position, Y position. This is physically like where on the screen I wanted it, right? So, I was thinking, it shouldn't, you know what, it shouldn't be plus the position. It should be Should it be like the position minus X? Is that how it should be? So I got the position of it, right? I want it at wherever let's say I want it. Let's say I want it at the screen. Would it be minus self dot center X? Right, so that position, if I just did it by position, it would be the top left of the corner is where it was figuring out its position. But if I say I wanted it minus my center X, which would be the width of it divided by 2, minus it or plus it? Plus my center X. Perhaps. I can't. Jeez. Plus. And the Y would be the same way, I think. Plus self dot center Y. Right, so now when I create my text, which is, where am I creating my text? Right here. My game title text. Right, I'm calling it a text class. The font I want it to use is Cooper Black. I want it the size 30. What do I want it to say? My game title variable that we created at the very beginning. What color? Green. And then I've been saying I want 185 minus 20, which that made my word Frogger in the center of the screen, which, as we already saw, does not scale properly. When I changed it to Space Invaders, it didn't work. So what we're going to try to do is get the width to work out right. I want to be able to say I want it at width divided by 2. That's where I want to say I want it at. If I want it to center the screen, that's what I want it to say. All I want to say. I don't want to do any extra math because that would change. That would, there would be, I'd have to, there's more calculating, hard coding that I'd have to do. So, does that put my frog in the center of the screen? No. All the way to the left. Or all the way to the right. So basically where my Space Invaders was. So, is it minus then? Hey, that's looking pretty good. Pretty good, right? I put my Frogger in the center of the screen. Right? So if we try minus here too. If I say minus here, and where we created the text, if I put height divided by 2, right here, hopefully we get exactly the center of the screen, right? I mean, that is what I want. This is just saying I want it in the middle of the X and in the middle of the Y. Therefore, exactly the center of the screen. Does that work? Hey, that's looking pretty good, right? So, big test. If I change it to Space Invaders, is it still in the center of the screen? And if it is, that means I now have it. When I thinking about where I want other text to be, if I make another text, I just have to think about it by its center, not the top left corner. That way I'm truly drawing by the center X, making it a lot easier for me to figure out where I need to do, like, width divided by 0.3 or something. Hey, look at that. Look at that. How close is that to the center of the screen? Whew. On the money. Again, why do I have the grid? Makes things way easier to figure out if they're close to the center, not in the center. They lined up, they're not lined up. Look at that. So if obviously I'm not going to want this in this. Well, I may eventually have it in the center of the frog or text in the center of the screen, but we're going to say we want it at 0 is not going to work. Why? Because I'm drawing it from the center Y. So, what can I do? Is the center of my text then now 15? So can I say negative 15 or plus 15, not negative 15? Will that bring it down 15 pixels just to keep it in the screen? Hey, look at that, man. Things are coming together. Let's change the name now before I forget. So, here we go. If I say Frogger, does it all still work? Look at that, man. We've got it. We got it. Okay, what did we do this episode? I explained how I made a new group for my logs. I still have all the individual log groups, just like the cars, but I made an extra group that holds all the logs in it. That way, I can use a built-in function in the sprite groups called sprite collide any, and basically that just tells me, it spits out information to easily let me capture and determine whether my frog is on a log or not on a log, right? And it obviously, instead of it saying dead, it's gonna show a drowning frog. I don't know. We'll get to that when we get to the art part. And then what else do we do? Well, we also just figured out how to properly draw our text, or when I create a text group now, my X and Y position, wherever I say I want it to be, will be where the center of whatever text I create. If I call it Space Invaders, the X and Y position will be, the X and Y position I put in coordinates will be by the center of the text, not by the top left corner of it or anything weird like that. So, truly, when I make any text, my X and Y, I just have to think about, okay, where do I want the center of the text to be? Okay, I want the center of the text to be 15 pixels from the right side. Then I just say my Y position would be just width, or my X position would be width minus 15, and that would put the center of whatever text I'm drawing 15 pixels. It might go off the screen because whatever, but simplified where I want my text to be placed, right? Very easy to understand. Now, before I had to individually text go, okay, this word is 77 pixels long. Okay, the middle of that is this. Do some math to figure out where. Now I don't do that. I just create the X and Y in accordance with where I want the center of the text to be. And it does all the how long, figures out the how long it is, finds the middle in the middle X and Y for me. I don't have to do any of that in my head. I think I've talked about that enough. And then we also talked about how I hold the space bar. Oops, I should probably click on the game again. Hold the space bar and the grid shows. And again, not going to be an end of game feature, obviously, but it lets me check why I'm creating this game. Does everything line up? Now, like when we draw a background, I'll be able to see, okay, is my goal at the end of the screen, is that nice and lined up with this grid system? Is that going to be that big of a deal? No, but this grid system, I can say right here, this is 32. This pixel right here is x coordinate 32. This pixel here is x coordinate 64, 128, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't have to figure it out. When I go to my drawing program, I'm going to put a grid. I'm going to make a canvas the exact size of the screen. I'm going to put a grid over it on a layer so it's not a permanent grid. And I can literally draw and know exactly, where I want. I know from this point up to here and across, it's going to be a grassy area. I can draw a little grassy area across here. I don't have to draw it and hope that everything's lining up, and then I import it and go, oh crap, my grass is starting down here too low, and then go back edit the picture. No, I got all the information for my screen before I even get there. Did I need the grid to do that? No. But I do. I do. Somebody else is good at this stuff? Maybe not. But I've dwelled on that long enough. I think I've got everything I need. I got a safe zone. I got collision. I got an open space to come up with some more ideas. I know if I'm on a log or not on a log. And I know if technically I'm in a goal. Which, if I remember right, if you jump into the center of a goal, like meaning there's two goals and I jump into the center, that's also a death. So, when I draw the background, I should say, after we have the background drawn, or at least hashed out, that's when I can determine where maybe, okay, if my center X is taking up this position, I'm dead as well, But that's something we can work out later. But for now, I literally have Frogger created. I have to come up with a scoring system. Maybe every negative 32 I go up the screen, I get 10 points. I don't know. Or maybe if I just reach here in general, I get 100 points. Like if I reach this y coordinate, I get 100 points. And if I reach this y coordinate, I get 100 points plus whatever bonuses I might have gotten in this area. Or if I eat a fly, I get 10 points. Or there's tons of things I can still add, but the basis of Frogger is 100% done. I can play Frogger now. Yes. So, thank you for watching. I am Hydra Mike. Have a wonderful day. Oh yeah, you've been watching with Hydro Coding. Make sure you subscribe.